Welcome to the Time to Practice podcast. This is a space where we talk about music practice, the ups and downs that young musicians go through related to practice and learning music, and how we as parents, caregivers, and music educators can support the young musicians in our lives, support ourselves, and support each other. My name is Christine Goodner. I'm a music educator, author, and podcaster who has made it my mission to talk about music practice and to support educators and families looking to make home practice more effective and to reduce conflict and frustration in the practice room. I'm glad you're here. This episode is brought to you by my book, Music Practice Makeover. This is a resource I created to help support families involved in practice with young children and to help support positive, productive practice sessions. It also can help you problem solve if practice starts to become a challenge. You can find this resource on bookshop.org, amazon.com, barnesandnoble.com, and there's also an audiobook format as well. Here is what one 5-star review had to say about this resource. This is the perfect resource for parents, either just starting out or well on the journey and wanting new ideas on how to improve their practicing relationship with their child. It provides actionable steps that can be implemented one at a time to create positive change over time. Our child doesn't remain the same, and so our practice relationship should not either. I will be recommending this to all the parents in my studio. As always, thank you for supporting the resources I create. That helps me keep this podcast free of outside ads and makes this resource possible. Welcome, everyone. I'm excited today to be bringing you a few practice tips submitted by a listener. I tried this format out over the summer, and it seemed like it really connected with listeners. So I'd love to do a couple episodes like this throughout the school year as well. If you have a practice tip you'd like to submit for a future episode, please fill out the Google form in the show notes, and I would love to share your tip on a future episode. This week, I am sharing 2 tips from Lauren, who's a Suzuki parent of 2 Suzuki Piano students. Her 11-year-old is in book 3 and her 7-year-old is in book 1, just so you have some context about the tips that she shares with us. So I want to say a big thank you to Lauren for listening and for sharing your great ideas with us. Tip number 1. Lauren says this is a tip that was actually a suggestion to her from Brianne Christensen, who she met at a parent session at the Colorado Suzuki Institute. And she says she believes she's a Suzuki piano teacher in Utah. If you're listening, Brianne, thanks for sharing your tip. It's being shared out in the wider world. I appreciate you as well. So this tip was to use the Qubits game. There's a solo game version that runs about $15. And we start, Lauren says, each practice session with a random Qubits challenge card that has a visual pattern on it. My son has the small wooden tray and the 16 small cubes. I have an agenda, as she does as the parent, for each item that he completes. For example, a scale, a twinkle, a review piece, a practice spot in repetition, and so on. He gets to put 1 cube in the pattern tray for each one. The tiny mental and physical break to put the cube in the tray and work on solving or matching the card has been so helpful for my son's particular challenge of wanting to start over from the beginning if something didn't come out just the way he wanted it to. It almost seems like the act of putting the cube in the tray acts as an inhibition response. I will put my own thoughts here for a second. I have to say, I immediately ordered this game to add it to my studio game collection after getting this tip ready to record for you this week. And I'm really excited to try this out with students and share it as a practice tip with other families that I work with. And the solo version of this game that was mentioned here is listed for ages 8 and up. But there's also, I found a junior version that's for 5 and up that has 4 blocks or cubes on each card to match. So that could be an option as well if you have a younger child or less practice tasks that you are looking to complete. I loved this tip, and I can't wait to hear if any of you listening try this out with your students or your children at home and how it works for you. Great idea. I'm not a neuroscientist. I don't know exactly what's going on in the brain that's helping Lauren's son, but part of my theory would be that what's going on is that when our brain is busy adding the blocks to the pattern in this game, it could take up the mental space that might usually have us stuck in patterns of thinking that could be negative or uh, stuck in unproductive thought patterns about our practice and making it hard to move on or accept that something hasn't gone just the way we wanted. It's a great tip just for the fun brain break aspect of it, and also to see a visual representation of it's a great tip for just the fun brain break part of practice that I often recommend, and also for having a visual representation that things are getting done and the practice is moving along and tasks are getting accomplished, which Merritt Biddix shared with us in her episode earlier this year. I'll link to that episode in the show notes. She talked a lot about how helpful it was for her personally to see a visual representation that things were getting done and she was making progress, because she said music disappears into the air, we can sort of forget or not be able to tangibly feel that we've made progress. So it's a great tip for getting out of those patterns of thinking that might get in our way in practice, and for many other reasons as well. So I love that one. Number two, Lauren says, in your podcast, the owner of the practice shop mentioned that she uses bingo cards. So, a side note, my interview with Leslie Thackeray, owner of the practice shop, was in episode 57. I'll link that in the show notes as well. That's a great episode. I've gotten great feedback on. It was always a pleasure to see and speak with Leslie. Got great resources, both free and items you can order from her shop on her website there. So, Lauren says, I use myfreebingocards.com to customize my own bingo card. The cards are easy to make and print at home, and I find they last 2 to 3 weeks before we need to update them with new practice spots. The 5 by 5, which would be like 5 boxes going down, 5 across, work well for our 30-minute practice sessions. An example of what I include in the bingo card, Lauren says, is a left hand scale, a right hand scale. Again, the pianist she's talking about in her household, left hand twinkle, right hand twinkle, using a twinkle spinner, rolling the review dice, practice spot, for example, measure number something or line number something, sight reading work, play your most recent piece. And she says, I always make sure to include a free space and a quote, your choice space. She says she uses cereal, especially a special cereal in their household might be something like Fruit Loops that maybe doesn't normally get purchased, as markers, and then occasionally small candies. He gets to eat them at the end of the practice session. If you don't want to use food, Lauren says you could use a stamp or stickers or little plastic markers as well. So, what a great tip, Lauren. I love that idea. I love the way you've practically shared how you use this in practice at home, and also that it's important to notice maybe every couple of weeks the bingo card might need to be refreshed, but then you can get your new practice tasks on the list or in the squares there and keep it interesting over time. And I think, just from my own perspective, that bingo cards can be so fun to incorporate into practice for a lot of different reasons and in a lot of different ways. I often give them out over breaks from lessons like winter break or on summer break when I might see students inconsistently, to hopefully get them picking up their instrument and practicing when they're not seeing me every single week. And I love the idea of incorporating it into daily practice in this really practical way. So I hope some of you will put this into action. I'd love to hear how that goes for you. Especially if you create your own bingo card, I think it's great to tailor that to what your child needs to work on right now. And as your child gets older, you could, have them offer you suggestions to put on the card as you're making it. You could have review pieces on a bingo card, individual practice tasks, like Lauren said, and so many different options. There's a certain amount of practice that can be repetitive and less stimulating to kids' brains than their newest piece. And I think helping some of the tasks that might feel a little more chore like or less enticing to younger students as they're getting going, making a game of it like this can be so helpful. I think it can work for students of all ages for that matter, helping students learn to make parts of practice more tolerable or see them there and acknowledge that they've been finished successfully for the day. I want to encourage you, if you're a parent and this feels like a lot of work to put these things together, that when my students keep playing over time, I always see a switch at some point in their journey where they learn to make these tasks more tolerable for themselves and it's less of a job for you to help them with. Or maybe they no longer find those things challenging to get done in their practice, or they see the benefits. Like, if I warm up with a scale, I'm going to play my piece better in tune. It saves me a lot of frustration. I'm going to play the scale and not worry about how exciting it is in any given moment. I see it's useful, things like that. And I think when we're talking about practice games and ideas like this, we're helping bridge the gap for our student until they take that on themselves and their either musical skills get there or maturity, or they can kind of gamify things for themselves in their own brain and they need us less and less for that kind of thing. So, again, thank you, Lauren, for these great tips. I'm really excited to put the games that you inspired me to get into practice in my own studio. And I can't wait to hear from listeners who make these work for themselves as well. If you want to share how you've been making practice tips that you've heard on the podcast or any of your own that you want to share with me, please reach out to Christine at SuzukiTriangle.com or through Instagram. My handle is at Suzuki Triangle there. If you'd like to share how you put these games into action in your own home or studio, or if you have your own practice tip that you'd like to share. I always call this a community-based podcast because just like others generously shared their ideas that Lauren adopted in her house to help support her children, her sharing it with all of us for this podcast helps spread that to more people to try. And I think the generous sharing is what makes our music community and our time to practice community so special. We know we're not in it alone, and other people can share what they've learned and what they're finding helpful. Thanks to everyone who's submitted a practice tip and who comes on the podcast to share your ideas about music learning and practice with us. We all appreciate you. And I know many of you hear things on this podcast and share it with people in your world. So I love that we get to do that as part of a community together. I hope you feel inspired this week to try one of these ideas or a creative idea of your own that maybe you haven't pulled out in a while in practice, just like I am. Happy practicing this week, everyone. Take good care.